Even if a part of Deculein's personality had been transmitted to him, it was only a fragment. The core of who he was remained Kim Woojin. That was why his head was pounding, a result of the extreme mental stress he had accumulated without even realizing it. Yet, on the outside, he appeared calm and composed, walking with perfect poise. On the distance, she stood still, and the distance between them naturally closed. When he was within her reach, she spoke first, greeting him with a simple, "Long time no see." She was a striking woman. Her hair was white as snow, her eyes icy and clear. They reminded him of a bloody scene he had once witnessed on a monitor. Out of Deculein's 16 deaths, 8 of them had involved her. She asked him how he had been. Her name was Julie. She was this body's fiancée and a named character destined to rise to the top of the knights in the future. He hadn't expected to see her there. He looked at her expressionlessly. Julie simply waited in silence. Finally, he replied with a single word, "Fine." It was the best he could manage. However, Julie's calm demeanor faltered. Her brow furrowed, and she took a deep breath before speaking. She asked him if he had truly been fine, despite breaking the promise they had made a week ago. He stood still, meeting her gaze. Beneath the surface of those beautiful eyes, he could see flames of hostility burning. He had no idea what promise she was referring to. He nodded and attempted to step past her, explaining that he didn't recall and tried to move on, but Julie shifted slightly, blocking his path. She asked if he was trying to run, like before again. It seemed she wasn't going to let him pass. He explained that he seemed to have forgotten due to the fever he had suffered from recently and asked her to remind him what promise they had made. Her face twisted with despair, more lament than anger. She told him it looked like she had been wrong to trust him, her voice cold and cutting, filled with a mix of sorrow and disappointment. Finally, she told him he could go and stepped aside. He replied, "Then if you'll excuse me," and brushed past her. Julie remained standing there long after he left. The anger and hurt swelling inside her burned red hot. She had tried to hold her ground, but Deculein had proven to be a more formidable opponent than she had anticipated. After all, he was a board member of the university. Today, Julie had come to see for herself whether Deculein would keep his promise. She had made it clear to him, if he, Deculein, confessed his deceit to everyone and asked for forgiveness, she would stand by him even if the world collapsed. This wasn't about the shame of a broken engagement or maintaining appearances for the sake of their families. It was about her conviction as a knight, a belief she held above all else. She had been certain he would agree. Her engagement to Deculein had been one of convenience. Deculein, a supposedly talented mage, and Julie, a prodigious knight. The union of their bloodlines, the Yuklines and the Freydens, would benefit both politics and lineage. No one had dared object to this marriage. She had told herself it was fine, that it was for the good of the household, even if she didn't love him. But then, the truth had come to light. The two households had discovered that his talents were a lie. Perhaps he had refused to acknowledge it, but he had deceived the world, claiming to be a genius in spell analysis, to become a professor. News headlines had declared the fall of the whiz kid, questioning the youngest top professor of magic, Deculein, who had shown no progress since his last research 3 years ago. After a certain incident, he had stopped producing any notable accomplishments. Despite this, the Yuklines and the Freydens had tried to keep it quiet. They hadn't wanted their flaws exposed to the public or to become the subject of gossip. But Julie couldn't accept this. She had been willing to endure a loveless marriage, but she couldn't tolerate the lies. That was her conviction as a knight. That was all there was to it. He had agreed too, but now it seemed he wasn't going to keep their promise until the very end. In University Magic Tower cafeteria, Ifrin sat in the cafeteria poking at her omelet rice with a sigh. Her mind was still replaying the events of the lecture. Annoying bastard, she thought. I was going to expose his spell interpretation skills as a lie using that unknown spell, but he made me look like an idiot with no manners just because I didn't say my name. I thought I'd die of embarrassment. She tried to console herself. But he must have been embarrassed too, right? He doesn't have any real experience. What was that about illusion magic? If he were desperate, why'd he choose illusion magic? Ifrin knew that illusion magic was notoriously difficult. It required a tremendous amount of mana to deceive the perception and consciousness of others, making its cost-performance rate miserable. Most illusion-type spells require a medium to work effectively. Yet, Deculein had identified the spell on the dormitory's front door as illusion-type magic without any medium. It didn't make sense. She recalled the chaotic scene from the previous night. The spell had been drawn on the dormitory's front door, and its purpose was to increase the freshman's research skills. Ifrin had thought it was the perfect opportunity to expose Deculein. Who's the idiot now? She muttered, feeling really satisfied. Just as Ifrin was stewing in her frustration, a loud voice called out to her, Ifrin! Ifrin! She looked up to see a group of fellow magicians approaching. They were the same students she had met during the newcomer orientation the previous week. One of them, a girl, exclaimed, "Thank you." Ifrin blinked in confusion. "Huh? What? For what?" The girl placed her hands on Ifrin's shoulders and shouted, "About the magic spell on the dorm's front door yesterday." After assuming it was a real barrier and recomposing the spell, it turned out to be right. Ifrin was stunned. "Wait, that magic was really a barrier?" The girl continued, "Ah, so cool. We didn't have the nerve to ask that scary professor, but you're really brave." Ifrin's mind raced. "No way. There's no way he could have known that." The girl added, "Wow, it really is. Don't you think Deculein is truly amazing? There weren't any parameters, but how did he know it was illusion-type magic?" Ifrin was at a loss for words. The girl then said, "Thanks, Ephraim. We're going to write up a report and I'll add your name." Ifrin stammered, No, you don't have to do that, but yeah, hand it in." The group hurried away, leaving Ifrin staring blankly after them. She thought, what nice people they are. They could have just not said anything, but they said they'd share the credit. To think he was lucky and got it right. I just improved Deculein's reputation for nothing. Ifrin's gaze fell on the syllabus in front of her. Understanding Elemental Magic. Grade. Debutante Restricted. Advanced. 5 credits. Lecturer, Deculein von Grahan-Yukline. The lecturer was none other than Deculein von Grahan-Yukline. Although she didn't have an elemental attribute, she knew that elements were the basis of all magic. As the ancient saying went, "Know thy enemy and yourself, then you'll never lose." She clenched her fists. "I need to stay strong if I'm going to keep seeing that annoying guy's face from now on. Just you wait, Deculein. I'm going to expose you soon." Ifrin growled as she stared at the syllabus. The Imperial University is the best university in the world, and its magic department stands at the pinnacle of all its faculties. To put it into perspective, the magic department is like Seoul University's medical school, and the Magi Tower is akin to Seoul National University Hospital. It's the cream of the crop. Woojin noted that the campus itself was breathtaking, with its sprawling grounds and meticulously maintained gardens, which made it feel like stepping onto an American college campus. Woojin mentioned that every detail, from the architecture to the atmosphere, had been carefully crafted by his team and him during countless late nights. However, he couldn't help but think that it would have been even more enjoyable if he were experiencing the place in someone else's body. As he wandered the campus, he suddenly noticed someone rushing behind him. Before he could bump into him, his back elbow hit and sent their belongings flying, making them fall. The person quickly apologized, explaining they were in a hurry and hadn't seen him. For a moment, Deculein thought it might be an assassin, but it turned out to be the magician who had been in the car with him earlier. He addressed the magician, asking if his name was Zoro. The magician, confused, corrected him, saying his name was Alan. He acknowledged his mistake, and Alan awkwardly pointed out that Alan and Zoro didn't really sound alike, but let it go. He continued walking in silence, but Alan suddenly spoke up again, complimenting him by saying he looked picturesque walking like that and he should have brought a camera. He told Alan that he didn't need to say things like that anymore. Alan responded with a hesitant acknowledgement, leaving him to wonder if Deculein had previously ordered Alan to flatter him. In the distance, the Magi Tower loomed, visible from almost anywhere on campus. Its towering presence made it easy to navigate toward, and it didn't take long before he reached its base. The magic tech door of the tower recognized his body and iris, sliding open automatically. As he stepped into the lobby, a sea of people bowed in unison. He acknowledged them with a nod and turned to Alan, instructing him to go to the office. Alan nodded eagerly and darted forward to press the elevator button. The display lit up with the number 77. In just 3 seconds, the Manastone elevator arrived, and they stepped inside. His office occupied nearly half of the 77th floor. It was vast, opulent, and meticulously designed. The interior sparkled with cleanliness, the shelves lined with countless books, and the desk adorned with crystal beads, fountain pens, a diamond name plaque, the Imperial Professor's seal, and golden wands. He surveyed the dazzling space with an impassive expression. As he settled into the office chair, his eyes fell on a stack of papers neatly arranged on the desk. He remarked that this must be why Alan had been in such a hurry to see him. Alan confirmed, explaining that it was the list of sponsorships for the new mages this year. He picked up the document and scanned its contents. The list included details such as the new magician's name, age, attribute, main type, sponsorship amount, and a scouting report. The gist of it was clear at a glance. He explained that the Magic Tower operated much like a research facility in the real world. Funding was essential for the development of magic. Professors there sponsored new mages they deemed worthy of investment. Some names on the list shimmered in gold, which he assumed was due to Deculein's unique attributes. Man of great wealth and vision. Man of great wealth. Rating, rare. Description, a born man of great wealth. When it came to money-making, he possessed unrivaled intuition. The more information provided, the more accurate his assessments became. Vision, rating, rare. Description, the power to intuitively perceive characteristics and potential with his eyes. This trait was most effective when combined with others. Together, these traits allowed him to instantly gauge the financial potential of these magicians. Just by glancing at their names and scouting reports, which detail their strengths and weaknesses, he could determine whether they were worth investing in. Among the names that glowed, one shone brighter than the rest. It was Ifrin Luna, a 17-year-old new magician with the attribute of vessel and a main type of destruction and support. Her sponsorship amount remained at 0 out of 500,000 eln, unlike every other new magician who had received at least 10,000 elni. He asked Alan why Ifrin Luna didn't have any sponsorships. Alan hesitated, explaining that everyone had been too afraid to sponsor her. He nodded, understanding the unspoken implication. As he reviewed Luna's scouting report, something surprising caught his eye. The sponsorship amount was still listed as 0 out of 500,000 eln. He turned to Alan and asked if he knew how much food costs these days. Alan mentioned that the royal pork cutlet was about 3 eln, and added that it was very delicious, though he quickly apologized for the digression. He deduced that 1 elni was roughly equivalent to 1,001. He remarked that Ifrin Luna didn't seem to know much about the world, given that she had requested a maximum of 500,000 elna, 500,000 elni, or about 500 million won. He wondered if she planned to eat until her stomach burst, noting that even if it was called a sponsorship, she would have to repay it with interest. He stroked his chin, deep in thought. Ifrin Luna was a named character from the game, and according to the developers who designed her, she had lost her father to Deculein. This magician was Deculein's enemy, or rather, Deculein was her enemy. If things played out as they did in the game, he would meet the same tragic ending. He reflected on the description of a villain's fate, which was rated as a question mark and described as the fate of a villain. The whole world wanted him dead, but what didn't kill him would make him stronger. In the game, Deculein had died in countless ways: a sword to the heart, a wand to his head, poison in a wine glass, a bomb, terrorism. No matter the method, the outcome was always the same. If he wished to live, he had to make a different choice, a choice the original Deculein would never have made. He asked Alan if almost half of the people on the list would hate receiving money from him. He watched Alan's reaction closely. Alan shuddered and shook his head, but his hesitation betrayed the truth. Though he denied it, his body language screamed yes. He declared that he would give them the sponsorship even if they didn't like it, as they wouldn't dare refuse his offer. As he spoke, a pang of sadness washed over him. He began checking names, but under the sponsor column, he wrote anonymous. Revealing his identity would only backfire. He instructed Alan to turn in the documents and borrow a few books for him, saying he would write down the titles before heading home. For some reason, the thought of leaving work already felt unbearable. He scribbled down the titles of a couple of books, one on magic metals and another on control magic. Alan looked puzzled. Both were beginner-level texts, but he quickly composed himself and left the room, his voice louder than usual. Understood. Now alone. Rays of sunlight filled the room. He realized that he needed a lot of money to survive, as some of the bad relationships he had could potentially be resolved with enough wealth. Investing in a mage was one way to generate income, but it wasn't enough. Not even close. This world was filled with countless named characters who despised him, and they would seize any opportunity to end his life. To survive, he understood that he needed more than just money. What he truly needed was strength,